OMH funded units would be part of a bigger project, like we've been talking about, and okay, good. And the other units are low-income individuals or families. Why is the benefit of being OMH units being in affordable housing? Now, I'm sure many of you providers, years past, citing single-site OMH housing years ago was a nightmare. It was a lot of not in my backyard kind of thing. It was really difficult. So, you know, and it also, you know, being in, you know, as we're learning with Olmsted, it's better to be in a setting that's more integrated. So the benefits to us is by providing these units, it reduces the stigma of citing it, lessens community resistance, hopefully. I know there's still some of that, but and so the OMH units are in there, so it still provides opportunities for recovery and rehabilitation. And housing is in a mixed-use neighborhood. The funding for housing development is from several different sources, so that reduces costs. You know, in these mixed-use projects, it's not just, you know, like in years ago, we developed it. OMH had capital. We gave grants to providers, and that was it, 100% us. In 2008, we started doing tax credit model. So we kind of leveraged in tax credits and other sources more often, working with HCR and the Dormitory Authority. So what we do is, again, we have to work with the not-for-profit provider. That's what our contract is with the not-for-profit provider. So that, and we provide, like as I said before, capital and operating funding. OMH, we again promote mixed use. We touched on a lot of this already, so I'm going to skip that. But what I want to talk about is what are some of the other sources of potential other funding. So tax credits, that's huge. You know, that's great. So by developing these projects as affordable housing, again, it's an ideal mix. So it's great, and providers like Ralph do a good job with that. We work with the Dormitory Authority on a lot of deals, who issue tax-exempt bonds. Sometimes commercial lenders would provide some of the permanent debt. OTA, HAP grants is a very important part of putting a project together, which I know Ralph and Chris are going to show how they've done it before. And HCR, of course, they issue or oversee the issuance of the 9% tax credits, which I know it's very competitive, but it's wonderful when they get it.
If I can just interrupt for a minute. What we want to do, one of the goals here, and we're going to keep trying it, and this is what I spoke about earlier, is we want to talk about timing, especially how you time deals in and the process of a deal. We're going to get to more of this, you know, so everybody don't worry, because it's the distinction between a 4% and a 9% deal. On a 9%, it's awarded, as everybody knows, early round or regular round. 4% are rolling through an open resolution, usually through HFA, with the 4% as of right credits that come with it. But, you know, you have to look at, I think, and Chris will get to more of this too when we talk about the numbers, and Ralph as well, because when you're sizing your deal, when you're figuring out your budget, you have to figure out the timing, and also, Jim, a little bit about the DASNY money. When does that apply for? When does that come in? And how it's tied into a 4% and a 9% deal.
Okay, great. That's a great lead into my next slide here. So, well, OMH has financing structures that work with both 9% and 4% tax credits. On the 4% deals, they're as of right as long as there's tax-exempt bonds in the project. Okay, so, but what OMH does, we have an arrangement for our share of the project with both HFA and DASNY, where it's the HDFC and the provider's mortgage, but we would pay the mortgage on their behalf. So that's the way we treat a 4% deal. With the 9% tax credits projects, bonds don't blend with that, as many of you know, and so what we do instead is we still are our share of the project, they would get a permanent loan, and we would put that amount of annual debt service in the provider's operating contract, in addition to that operating funding I outlined earlier. So, and then they would have to pay their own loan. So that's how we treat it.
Just before we go on, I know many of you know all of this stuff, you know all the acronyms. Some of you are just rolling your eyes back saying all these acronyms and tax rates and 4% and 9% and bonds, and you're wishing you went to the meditation group. What I learned a long time ago is, as a developer, I don't need to be an expert in all of these things. I just need to know people and make friends with them and pay them to understand it and move it along.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, I have one of the books back in my office, the tax credit. Yeah, they're like this. Yeah, that's the book, right? If you want to, stay up late at night and read it, that's fine. Or you hire a tax credit consultant or work with a developer that knows the stuff.
You fall asleep in 5 minutes.
So back to what do we look at? How do we get an approval? It all starts with, as Ralph said earlier, with an RFP. So like we now just released the results of an RFP. We have 700 units of housing that are statewide, 300 in downstate, that where providers were given the go-ahead to try to put a project together. So they're looking for sites, and we have other money available. It doesn't have to come out of the project cost. We can pay for appraisals, feasibility studies, phase one environmentals. So what we do then after the appraisal, they know they can buy it for within market value. The feasibility comes up with a cost estimate. We would then seek division of budget approval at that point. There would be certain assumptions in there as far as how much tax credits they can generate, maybe based on past history of what kind of equity raise they've experienced, what the market, working with their, maybe they would talk to some investors about what's current, right? So, but we would get approval at that point.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
At the point that you're getting that approval, who else is vetting that budget, right? Because you don't want to go to DOB and get DOB's approval on a budget. That's then not viable in the market. So what's happening from your end, Ralph or Chris? Are you?
Well, I guess, I rely on Chris to work on the budget. By the end of this, you'll realize I don't do anything.
The only thing I do on this panel is introduce people. So let me introduce Chris Betts. Chris Betts is the president of Betts Housing LLC, a real estate development services firm focusing on affordable and supportive housing. Betts Housing Partners specializes in several key areas, including low-income housing tax credit, mixed finance projects layered with public subsidies, and supportive and special needs housing. And while I'm at it, I think everybody knows Marion Zucker, but Marion Zucker, in case you don't know, Marion Zucker is the president of the Office in Finance and Development for the New York State Homes and Community Renewal. She joined the agency in February 2007, and she has an expansive career in the area of affordable housing, responsible for multifamily and single-family housing programs and debt issuances of the agency. So,
I just want to give a chance, though, to answer Marion's question. So we would look at the budgets with someone like a Chris and that kind of thing, get DOB approval. Then we have money. We can start paying for acquisition and the architect for design. And then the project is put out to bid. And at that point, we would then relook at the budget and see, do we have enough? Then you're much closer. What are the investors really willing to pay at that point? So, there's a second look at it. And if we have to go back for more additional dollars from OMH, we can do that. Or maybe there's ways in the budget to get other funding. So,
Jim, I'm sorry. But Jim, you'll do this before the deal closes.
Well, we have our closing. We'll put a lien on the property. We'll put a state aid grant lien on the property to secure our interest in the money. So our money is like a construction loan, and it's interest-free. There's no interest charge to the project. So
but you will put a lien on the property.
The lien's on the property. So
it's an important distinction if you're developing this, and you're looking at it. OMH, in order to put the lien on, you obviously have to have control of that property as well. So this can't be a speculative type, I'm
Yeah.
going to buy this, but I don't own it yet, I want seed money as a source.
Yeah.
You have to have control of the site in order for OMH.
And our
to
money
get
could be that seed money.
And then you can probably go through the due diligence of the site with the site control.
Yeah.
And then that's when HFA, Marion comes in with the bonds or with
Right,
substitute.
right. It would be later
to do
on.
the construction.
Yeah, later on when it's sold.
So this is a really crucial point, because if we didn't have that as OMH developers, we'd be working out deals with owners saying, okay, maybe in 9 to 12 months, we'll be able to close if we get all this funding together. And everybody knows in today's real estate market, that doesn't work.
Right.
So this can be done in maybe half of that time.
Yeah, and then OMH is sharing some of your risk in that case, you know what I mean? Because if a project, I mean, it's rarely happen, but if a project doesn't work out, then you would sell the site, and, you know, it would kind of be our loss if you didn't. Yeah, so it's, I don't think you got a better deal in town than that, right? I mean, it's,
So it's free money,
Yeah.
right? It's basically a free.
it is free money, but as long as, we just need to, at that point, get Division of Budget approval, and then, you know, as far as the project develops, then we relook at the budget. So I'm almost finished, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris. What we look at to approve them, to make sure they're acceptable, we want to know the location is good. Is there, you know, going to be a lot of community opposition? Is there on a bus line? Is it, you know, appropriate for that particular area? Does the mixed use meet the spirit of the new Olmsted mandate? You know, so now we're looking at that. The amount of funding from all sources, is it reasonable? So in other words, we're going to kind of, you know, pick apart Ralph and Chris and say, all right, what you're assuming, you know, we want to make sure it's reasonable and maybe vet it by HFA, and, you know, so we would do that. Our cost per unit has to be prorated for the amount in the project. So if the project's costing $250,000 per unit, we're not going to pay for our share of the project more than $250,000 per unit. Ideally, if there's some savings from other funding or tax credit equity, we would love to have a little bit of that savings, but in the new world of mixed use and Olmsted, we realize that that may not be possible because it's hard to fully fund these projects. So, and the Division of Budget has to kind of agree to a reasonable price. So we've gone to DOB, I say that 250 number, as of right now, that's kind of the highest we've ever had approved for a project. In this last RFP, because of Olmsted, our director kind of twisted arms and said we may have some projects closer to $300,000 per unit, and DOB kind of approved that. So, but again, it has to be equal to what the rest of the project is costing.
And Jim, I don't know, I might have been, you know, helping out in the back before, but did you talk, and if you did, just move on, a little bit about the RFP process, that how an applicant can apply for it, and again, timing.
Yeah,
what's the timing behind it? Is it an annual RFP round? So just give us.
No, it's different than the housing agencies in the state. We don't get an annual amount. Because our funding comes with not just the capital to do it, it comes with the operating dollars. Right. So it has to be something that's in the state budget, an initiative that to develop new housing. So.
In other words, what I mean is, like, if you have like HHAC, you have a certain time, and, you know, tax credits, 9% applications due by X.
Yeah.
Does OMH have a due date? Do you run an RFP on an annual basis?
Not if, like, for 2014, we didn't get any new beds, so we're not doing any new RFP. The RFP that we just finished was from an older appropriation that had been frozen a few years ago because of budget reasons. That was now thawed out, so we did the RFP to give these. But if in 2015, if they say, you know, New York 4 happens and they give us some capital and operating, we'll issue an RFP for, you know, if we get 1,000 units, we would figure out what regions of the state would get how many, and then our